Hello everyone, welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Aleph, and we'll be learning today Mitzvah Hashem Daf Ayin Vav Amud Aleph, but we have a drop left on Ayin Hey Amud Beis. We're continuing to learn the very interesting halachos of birchos hashachar. We have a drop left here on Ayin Hey Amud Beis, just a couple of Mishnah Berurahs left in Siman Mem Vav. So here at the end of Sif Tes, the Mechaber told us about the Shema Yisrael that we say in Karbonos, right? If you remember, we were discussing yesterday, we say, Ashreinu ma'tov chalkeinu ma'umanom garaleinu ma'yafi yerushaseinu Ashreinu sha'anachnu mashkimu ma'arivim b'vatich niseis b'vatich b'drashais v'omer pamayim b'chol yom Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And the Ramah told us that we have to say Baruch Shem Kvod Balchusay Lo'olam Vayed together with that Shema Yisrael. We explained that we need to connect Baruch Shem Kvod Malchusay to Shema Yisrael. Otherwise, the Shema Yisrael sounds just like a Sipur Dvarim Ba'alma. It doesn't sound like we're saying Shema Yisrael to be Yotze Kriya Shema. It sounds like we're saying Shema Yisrael, just we're saying how fortunate we are that we have the opportunity to say Shema Yisrael. But this Shema Yisrael is not a Shema Yisrael that we're reciting to be Yotze anything. And we explained the reason we have that Shema Yisrael in Karbonos is because sometimes we daven too late. Sometimes we're going to hit Kriya Shema already after Zman Kriya Shema. And as a stopgap, as a failsafe, we have this Shema Yisrael in Karbonos to cover us so that we should be Yotze Yedei, the mitzvah Seder Raisa of Kriya Shema, in case we are going to miss it. Now let's take a look here near the bottom of Ayin Hey Amud Beis, Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Lamed Beis. The Ramah said that this is a safety against if we're going to hit Kriya Shema Shaloi Bizmana. Explains the Chavetz Chaim, when we say that we're going to get up to Kriya Shema when it's going to be Shaloi Bizmana. What's the Zman of Kriya Shema? Dahainu Achar Shalosh Sha'os. If it's going to be later than 3 hours into the day, Sha'avar Zman Kriya Shema. At that point, we're already missing Zman Kriya Shema. Va'adayin lo avar Zman birchos Kriya Shema. But we still have not passed the time limit for birchos Kriya Shema ad achar shah revius, until we get past the 4th hour of the day, kidalakaman b'siman nun ches sivav, like we're going to see later on in Siman nun ches. So, very quickly, Zman Kriya Shema is shalosh shois, 3 hours into the day. Zman Tefillah is 4 hours into the day. So Zman Tefillah is an hour later than Zman Kriya Shema. Birchos Kriya Shema is governed by Zman Tefillah, not by Zman Kriya Shema. The reason for that is that while we refer to these brachos as birchos Kriya Shema, we're going to see that they're not a birchos mitzvahs on Kriya Shema. If you notice, we don't say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvaysav v'tzivanu likroi Kriya Shema. Now, why we don't have a bracha on saying Kriya Shema, we'll deal with that later. But in any case, it's very clear that the birchos Kriya Shema are not birchos hamitzvos on the recitation of Kriya Shema. The brachos of Shevach v'Hodah to the Rabbeinu Shalom that Chazal were misaken that we should say around Kriya Shema. Chazal attached these brachos to Kriya Shema, but essentially they are tefillah. They're not Kriya Shema. And therefore, while Kriya Shema has a Zman, which is earlier, Zman Kriya Shema Shalosh Shois, since these brachos are essentially tefillah, they're governed by the Zman Tefillah, which is an hour later. Continues the Mishnah Berurah here. Avalim hu yarei sha'tzibur yavru gam zman birchos Kriya Shema. We said that if a person is davening and he's afraid that the tzibur might say Kriya Shema later than the Zman Kriya Shema, so he covers himself with the Kriya Shema that's in Karbonos. Now, says the Chavetz Chaim, what if the person looks at his watch and he realizes not only is the tzibur going to miss Zman Kriya Shema, they're also going to miss Zman Tefillah, which means that it's going to be too late to say birchos Kriya Shema. It's also going to be too late to daven. Says the Mishnah Berurah, in that case, ein loy lahamtin aleihem klal. Then don't wait around for the tzibur. Ki yafsid al yodam habrachos, because if you wait for the tzibur, it's very nice that as far as the mitzvah say daraisa of Kriya Shema, you'll be covered with the Kriya Shema and karbanis, but you're going to lose out on making the brachas. Because if you wait for the tzibur and it's going to be after dalit shois, you're not going to be able to say birchos Kriya Shema. V'gam hazman tefila shu gam ken lechatchila rak ad arba shois ken lekaman b'simin peites. You're also risking missing zman tefila, and lechatchila at least you're not supposed to daven shmona esrei of shachris after zman tefila. Rather, if you're in a situation where it seems that the tzibur is going to be later than dalit shois, then say Kriya Shema on time and daven b'yechidus, so that you should get your shmona esrei in before zman tefila. Ois Katan Lamed Gimel v'yoytzei bozeh. The Ramah said that if the tzibur is going to run late and run past zman Kriya Shema, then at least b'diavad you could be yoytzei your chiyuv daraisa of Kriya Shema with the Kriya Shema that's in karbanis. Ayin b'dogel me'eravava v'cheid b'chedushay Rabbi Akiva Eger shekasru. They write the b'choil during the week when you put on tefillin lo yichavid lotzeis el im kein heniach tefillin mikaydim. The whole suggestion that we're having over here is you come to shul and now you see that the tzibur is going to run late and they're going to hit Kriya Shema after Zman Kriya Shema. So we have an eitzah that when you say the pasuk of Kriya Shema in karbanos, you should have kavanah to be yoytzah the mitzvah say daraisa of Kriya Shema. Now, says the Chavetz Chaim, you should only do that if you're already wearing your tefillin when you say the Kriya Shema in karbanos. Why? What if you're not wearing your tefillin? If you're not wearing your tefillin, you shouldn't have kavanah to be yoytzeh Kriya Shema. Why? The chalak kari Kriya Shema b'li tefillin, because anybody who says Kriya Shema without wearing tefillin, ki'ilu meid edu sheker ba'atzmai. We have this famous line that it's as if he's saying false testimony on himself. Because what do you say in Kriya Shema? Ukishartam la'ois al yodecha v'hayulu taitafais beinenecha. So how is it that you're standing here and you're saying Kriya Shema and you're reciting the very psukim where the Rebbeinu Shalom commands you to put on tefillin, and yet you're not wearing tefillin? So it's like meid edu sheker ba'atzmai. You're getting up and you're getting up in front of the Rebbeinu Shalom and you're saying, I'm a no goodnik. Look, it says here in the pasuk that you're supposed to wear tefillin, but I'm not wearing tefillin. Therefore, he says, don't have kavanah to be yoytzeh Kriya Shema if you're not wearing tefillin. But but if for whatever reason you cannot put on tefillin right now, al yimna machmazeh mitzvah say the Kriya Shema, you can't cost yourself the mitzvah say daraisa of Kriya Shema because you don't want to be made a sheker in yourself. Ki tefillin and Kriya Shema shtei mitzvahs heim. Kriya Shema, tefillin, these are two separate mitzvahs. Ve'ein ma'akvin zeh one. Your lack of fulfillment of one of the mitzvahs doesn't prevent you from being mekayim the other mitzvah. So while it's true that there is such a concept that you don't want to be made edu sheker ba'atzmai, you can't not be yoytzeh mitzvah say daraisa of Kriya Shema because you're not wearing tefillin and you're afraid to be made edu sheker ba'atzmai. Ki tefillin Kriya Shema shtei mitzvahs ve'ein makpin zeh zeh va'afilu isura leka. We're not even talking about something that's prohibited. It's not that it's osur to say Kriya Shema without tefillin. There's an inyan, but it's not osur. So certainly if you can't put on tefillin now, and you see that Kriya Shema is approaching, you must say Kriya Shema without tefillin. The Layangru Kalakari Kriya Shema, we don't say this idea that if you say Kriya Shema without tefillin, you're made edu sheker ba'atzmai rak b'mezid. That's only when somebody b'mezid doesn't put on tefillin. I don't want to wear tefillin. I'm not putting on tefillin. And then he goes at it. He says Kriya Shema. Then he's made edu sheker ba'atzmai. But not if there's some kind of an oinus. Okay, that concluded Siman Mem Vav. Now we turn to Ayin Vav Amin Aleph, and we move on to Siman Mem Zayin. Dinei birchos HaTorah, the halachos of birchos HaTorah. Uba Yudal Seifim, and here we have 14 Seifim. Says the Mechaber Sif Aleph. Birchos HaTorah tzarich lizaher ba me'oid. When it comes to birchos HaTorah, we have to be very, very, very careful with our recitation of birchos HaTorah. Very careful to treat it very, very stringently. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cotton aleph. Ayin b'shagas Aryeh Siman Chav Daled. He sends us to this Shagas Aryeh in Siman Chav Daled. The Masik who reaches the conclusion birchos HaTorah hu min HaTorah, that the requirement to say birchos HaTorah is a daraisa. It's not a darabanan. The vast majority, almost all of the brachas that you recite are all darabanans. They're not daraisas. There's one other bracha which is a daraisa. Can you guess which one? You got it. Birchos hamazon. Benching is a daraisa. It says in the pasuk, "Va'achalta v'savata uverachta as Hashem leikecha." Va'achalta, you will eat, v'savata, you'll be satisfied, uverachta as Hashem leikecha, and you'll bench the Hashem your God. So the need to say birchos hamazon, that's a daraisa. I usually tell my children, I say, bench carefully. Make sure you treat benching with the proper seriousness, because it's one of the only brachas you'll ever make that are daraisa. Now the question is birchos HaTorah. The Shagas Aryeh reaches the conclusion that birchos HaTorah is also a daraisa. V'lachein, and therefore, says the Chavetz Chaim, turns out, im nistapik loy im beirach birchos HaTorah. Let's say somebody has a suffix whether or not he said birchos HaTorah. Somebody comes to shul in the morning and he's unfortunately half asleep, and he goes and he takes out his siddur, and then he kind of wakes himself up and he says, I don't know if I just said brachos or not. Did I say birchos HaShachar? Did I not say birchos HaShachar? Did I say all of them? Did I say some of them? And he's besupik. He doesn't know if he said birchos HaTorah or not. Says the Chavetz Chaim, v'lachein, based on this Shagas Aryeh that says that the requirement of birchos HaTorah is a daraisa, im nistapik lo im birchos HaTorah, if you have a suffix whether or not you made birchos HaTorah, chayzer umevarich, you would have to go ahead and you would have to make the brachas over again, because it's a sveika daraisa, a suffix daraisa l'chumra. You have to go ahead, you have to make the brachas again. And in the Sha'ar Tzion, he brings this down from the Pri Chadash, the Chayadam, and the Derech Chaim. Umikol makom. But nevertheless, says the Chavetz Chaim, even though I'm telling you that according to the Shagas Aryeh, birchos HaTorah is a daraisa, and therefore if you have a suffix, it's a suffix daraisa, you have to go l'chumra and you have to repeat the brachas. Umikol makom, kevan shehu lo suffix, since lamaisa, you're only saying the birchos HaTorah misveika, you're only doing it based on a suffix, lo yivarech el birchos asher bachar banu, you should only make the bracha. There are either 2 or 3 brachas that make up birchos HaTorah, right? We have Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu lasik b'divrei Torah. That's bracha 1. Now we have a paragraph. V'harev na Hashem Elokeinu es divrei sarasacha b'finu u'v'fiyai samecha beis Yisrael v'ni yech lanu anachnu v'tzetzeinu tzetzeinu loimdei sarasacha l'shma Baruch Atah Hashem amalami Torah li'am Yisrael. Some people start that paragraph with a vav, v'harevna. If you start it with a vav, then this second paragraph is attached to the first bracha, and it's all one long bracha. Others start not v'harevna, harevna, and they learn that the second bracha, the paragraph of harevna, is actually a second independent bracha. Then finally we have the bracha Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim nasad lanu es Torasai Baruch Atah Hashem noisen HaTorah. So that's either the second of 2 birchos HaTorah, or it's the third of 3 brachas of birchos HaTorah. Now it says the Mishnah Berurah like this: if you're reciting birchos HaTorah misafik, if you have a suffix whether or not you said birchos HaTorah, and now, because birchos HaTorah is a daraisa, you're going to repeat birchos HaTorah misafik. In that case, says the Mishnah Berurah, mikol makom, kevan shehu lo suffix, lo yivarech el birchos asher bachar banu. You should only say the bracha of asher bachar banu. Why? Shehi ha'ma'ula shebebrachos, because that is the greatest of the birchos HaTorah. K'di'isa b'Gemara, like the Gemara says in Masechtas Brachos, Yod Aleph Amud Beis. What does the Gemara in Brachos Yod Aleph Amud Beis say? It says, it brings down all 3 of these brachas, right? Lasik b'divrei Torah, Harevna and Asher Bachar Banu. And the Gemara says, I believe it's quoted from Rav Hamnuna, the Gemara says that the last one, Asher Bachar Banu, is the Ma'ula. It's the most praiseworthy, the greatest of all three of the brachas. Why? So Rashi says over there the reason is because it has contained in the bracha of Asher Bachar Banu is praise to the Ribbono Shel Olam. We're thanking the Ribbono Shel Olam. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam Asher Bachar Banu mikol ha'amim, who selected us from all of the nations of the world. V'nasan lanu es Torah, and gave us his Torah. So we're thanking the Ribbono Shel Olam. So there's a facet to this bracha which is Shevach V'Hidah to the Ribbono Shel Olam, and there's also Kilus, there's also praise to Klal Yisrael and to the Torah. Where do we see that? Well, what are we saying in the bracha? We're thanking Hashem, Asher Bachar Banu, who chose us, who chose Klal Yisrael, Mikol Ha'amim, out of all the nations. So we're praising Klal Yisrael. Look how fortunate Klal Yisrael is that we're Zoichet to have the Torah. We're also praising the Torah. Where's that? Well, what are we saying? Asher Bachar Banu mikol ha'amim v'nasan lanu es Torah. So we're saying how fortunate we are, how thankful we are to Borei Olam, that Borei Olam chose us to give us the Torah. So obviously we're praising the Torah. We're saying that we're fortunate because we were Zoicha to receive the Torah. So here we have a bracha that has all three of these facets. It's Shevach V'Hidah to the Ribbono Shel Olam, it's praise to Klal Yisrael, and it's praise to the Torah. For that reason, this is considered the Ma'ula of all the brachas. It's the greatest of all the brachas. So, okay, very nice. It's the greatest of all the brachas. But how does that explain why we only make that bracha? Right? What does the Chavetz Chaim say? We're stuck in a situation where we're going to recite birchos HaTorah misafik. Birchos HaTorah is a daraisa. The guy is mesupik whether or not he said birchos HaTorah. Sveika daraisa l'chumra, so he has to go say birchos HaTorah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, only one added a three. Which one? Asher Bachar Banu. Why? Because it's the Mu'ula mikol brachas. Yeah, but how does that excuse you from making the other two brachas? So if you look at the Shagas Ari, what the Shagas Ari says is like this. He says, really, may ikar adin, to be mekayim the chiyuv daraisa of birchos HaTorah, you only need one bracha. You don't need three brachas to make the bar, to meet the requirements of birchos HaTorah midaraisa. One bracha is enough. Chazal will misakin three brachas. But that means, says the Shagas Aryeh, once you make one bracha, you already satisfied the daraisa requirement. Now, if you're going to make the other two brachas, that's only to fulfill the derabanan, where the Chazal will misakin three. That's Sveika D'Rabbanan L'Kula. That you're not going to do to satisfy a Sveika D'Rabbanan. We're only saying the bracha again to satisfy a Sveika D'Araisa. That we do with one bracha. So pick the Ma'ula Mikol brachas, pick the greatest one of the three brachas, say that to meet your D'Araisa Dika requirement, and then you stop, and you don't make the other two. Okay. Weiter in the Mishnah Berurah here, nice cut in Aleph. We're 4 lines into the Mishnah Berurah at the end of the line. V'ayin b'shari tshuva, the Chavetz Chaim says, take a look at the shari tshuva. Shehevi b'shem k'tzas achronim, who brings down in the name of some achronim, the sovereign where they hold, the misafik lo yachzor v'yavarich. Okay, so we started off saying that based on the Shagas Aryeh, Sveika D'Araisa L'Chumra, if you have a suffix whether or not you said birchos HaTorah, you have to go say them. Now he brings down from the Shari Tshuva, who brings down from Achronim, that no, they say misafik, you don't make the bracha over again. Ube'emes, and in truth, says the Chavetz Chaim, kashem oid lismaich aleihim. It's very difficult to rely on these Achronim who say that you don't have to say the birchos HaTorah. We have many Rishonim. Haloihema Haramban, Hachinuch, Sefer Hachinuch was written by a Rishon, V'harajba, Beperek Shloisha Sha'achlu, Soivrim the birchos HaTorah, Hu min HaTorah. All of these Rishonim hold that birchos HaTorah is a deraisa dika requirement. So how could you be Soimich al Yachronim who say that if you have a suffix you shouldn't say birchos HaTorah? You have all these Rishonim who say it's a daraisa. V'yadua, and furthermore, says the Chavetz Chaim, v'yadua, it's well known she'oinish mi she'ena mevarach al HaTorah gadol ma'od, that the punishment for somebody who learns Torah without making birchos HaTorah is incredibly severe. So how are we going to go ahead and rely on these achronim who say that misafik we shouldn't say birchos HaTorah? Can't, you have to say it. However, says the Chavetz Chaim, there's an eitzah how to get out of this. Im nizkazel achar tefillah, let's say the suffix first comes up after davening, right? So you went ahead, you davened chakras. Unfortunately, you were a little too spaced out, or maybe a lot too spaced out. And now it gets to the end of davening, you finish davening, you take out a Mishnayos to learn Mishnah Yomi, and you start learning a Mishnah, and you say, wait a second. I have no recollection of making birchos HaTorah. And now suddenly you're not sure. Did I say birchos HaShachar? Usually I say birchos HaShachar before I put on my talis, but today I remember I put on my talis right away. I'm not sure. Did I say birchos HaTorah? Did I not? So your suffix was noilad. When did you come up with the suffix? Only after davening. Why does that make a difference? Explains the Mishnah Berurah like this. Im nizkazel la'achar tefillah, if the suffix doesn't come up until after davening, shekvar berich birchos avarabba, that means that you already davened. So you already said birchos Kriya Shema. The last one of the birchos Kriya Shema before Kriya Shema is avarabba. Avarabba, if you look at the tefillah of avarabba, it's a shtickle birchos HaTorah. What are you saying there? We asked the Rebbeinu Shalom, she gives us the schos, limud, lalamed, lishbar, velasa, yisolakayim, right? V'ha'ereinu b'sarasecha, v'dabek libeinu b'mitzvaysecha. So, avarabba is a shtickle birchos HaTorah. So says the Chavetz Chaim, if you have a suffix whether or not you said birchos HaTorah, but the suffix didn't come up until after davening, so you already said avarabba, after diyesh lahakel bazeh, then maybe you could be makel and you don't have to say birchos HaTorah over again. Afilu im lo lama tekef lachar atfila, even if you didn't sit down to learn right away after davening. What does he mean by this? What he means by this is simple. We're going to learn soon that let's say your suffix, let's say you realize by birchos Kriya Shema that you didn't say birchos HaTorah, or you realize that you have a suffix whether or not you said birchos HaTorah. So we're going to see that the halacha is, if you're going to say, if you didn't yet say avarabba, so then when you say avarabba, when you get up to avarabba, you should have kavana to be yoytze birchos HaTorah with avarabba, and immediately after davening you should take out a sefer and learn something to show that your avarabba was birchos HaTorah. So by avarabba you had kavana for birchos HaTorah, and then immediately upon finishing davening, you took out a sefer and you learned something. Then everybody would agree that you yoytze birchos HaTorah with avarabba. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakol limud varei. Over here, the Chavetz Chaim said, it could be that if your suffix came up after you completed davening, so you didn't have in mind by avarabba to be yoytze birchos HaTorah, and you didn't sit down with a sefer to learn immediately after davening, still in all, it could be that you could be makel and not say birchos HaTorah again because you were yoytze with avarabba. Okay? Again, in his words, he says like this, im nizkazel achar atfila, if you remembered and you got a doubt whether or not you said birchos HaTorah after davening, shekvar berich birchos avarabba, which means that you already said avarabba, after diyesh lahakel bazeh, it could be that in such a case you could be makel, and you don't have to go say birchos HaTorah now misafik. Afilu im lo lama tekef lachar atfila, even if you didn't make it your business to sit down and learn something right after davening. He brings this down from the Prima Gadim. Now, continues the Chavetz Chaim. V'im yakol avakesh me'acher sheyitziyenu b'birchos HaTorah. And if you have a suffix whether or not you made birchos HaTorah, and you have somebody in shul who did not yet say birchos HaTorah, and you could ask him to be moitzi you, or alternatively, sheyichavin lechatchila b'birchos avarabba liftar, or if you caught your suffix before you said avarabba, So now you have the opportunity to say Avarabba with Kavana, to be Yoitza birchos HaTorah, V'lilmai tekef lachar atfila, and then take out a sefer right away after davening, Matoiv, that would be great. Ubifrat, Lefi Masha b'tzas yakakach b'sefer Maimon Mordechai, says the Chavetz Chaim, based on what I found in the Sefer Maimon Mordechai, Shemevi b'shem ha'lavush va'olas tamid gamkein, who brings down in the name of the lavush and the olas tamid, to whom a derabanan, that birchos HaTorah is only a derabanan, not a daraisa, bevadai tzarich lizar lechatchila laseis kein. Certainly we should be careful that if we have a suffix whether or not we made birchos HaTorah, we should either find somebody to be moitzi us, or we should say Avarabba with Kavana for birchos HaTorah and learn right away after davening. But we should not go ahead and repeat or say birchos HaTorah now out of a suffix that maybe we didn't say it earlier. O birchos HaTorah b'tzibur, all of this was talking about the birchos HaTorah that we make as birchos HaTorah at the beginning of davening. How about the birchos HaTorah b'tzibur, which means the birchos HaTorah that you make by an aliyah? L'kuli alma d'Rabbanan mishum kavod hatzibur. Everybody agrees that birchos HaTorah is only a d'Rabbanan, which was niskan for kavod hatzibur, sharei kvar berek b'shachris. Because what do you mean? Birchos HaTorah you already said. Okay, so to recap, what's a little bit of a complicated sif ice cotton aleph in the Mishnah Berurah over here. We had the Mechaber who says that we have to be very, very careful with birchos HaTorah, and shortly we're going to see why you have to be so careful. The Mishnah Berurah brought down a Shagas Aryeh who says that birchos HaTorah is a daraisa. Now later on in this Mishnah Berurah that we just learned, he brings down an olas tamid and a lavush who say that it's only a derabanan. So we have this machlokes, but we have a Shagas Aryeh who says that birchos HaTorah is a daraisa. Now, if birchos HaTorah is a daraisa, so what happens if somebody has a suffix, whether or not he made birchos HaTorah? If it's a daraisa sveik, a daraisa l'chumra, you have to go l'chumra, and you're not allowed to learn Torah unless you go ahead now and say birchos HaTorah misafik. So the Chavetz Chaim said the Shagas Aryeh's psak that birchos HaTorah is a daraisa, it demands that if you have a suffix, whether or not you said birchos HaTorah, you got to go say birchos HaTorah before you learn Torah, because sveika daraisa l'chumra. But, says the Mishnah Berurah, he has a couple of caveats. First of all, you would only make one out of the three brachas. You would only make Asher Bachar Banu. And we explained why. Because by making one bracha, you already meet the daraisa dika requirement. Everything else is only d'Rabbanan, sveika d'Rabbanan l'kula. So again, Shagas Aryeh birchos HaTorah is a daraisa. Safik, sveika daraisa l'chumra. You can't learn before you say birchos HaTorah. But you only need one bracha, because once you say one bracha, you meet the daraisa dika requirement. Which bracha should you use? Asher Bachar Banu. Why Asher Bachar Banu? Because that's the greatest of all three. Why is it greatest of all three? Because it thanks Hashem, it praises Klal Yisrael, and it praises the Torah. Then says the Chavetz Chaim, but this is not really a good eitz at all. We really don't want you to say even Asher Bachar Banu misafik. Why? Well, first of all, there's the lavush and the olas tamid who say that there is no daraisa dika requirement of birchos HaTorah. The whole thing is only a d'Rabbanan. If the whole thing is only a d'Rabbanan, sveika d'Rabbanan l'kula, suffik brachas lahakal. We don't want you to make extra brachas because you're risking shem shamayim levatala loisisa shem hashav. So the Mishnah Berurah says this whole eitzah that you're going to go now and say birchos HaTorah misafik, we don't really like it. So instead, what should you do? Well, the best eitzah is find somebody who didn't yet say birchos HaTorah and have him be moitzi you. Listen to the bracha with kavanah that you should be yaitza with his bracha. Say amen. He'll have kavanah to be moitzi you. You're done. Somebody was moitzi you. That's eitzah number one. Eitzah number two. If your suffix came up at the beginning of davening, so you didn't say birchos Kriya Shema yet, so when you get up to Avarabba, which is a shtickle birchos HaTorah, have kavanah with your Avarabba, that your Avarabba should be your birchos HaTorah, and right away after davening, take out a sefer and learn something, without a hefsek between davening. Finish davening, take out a sefer, learn something. And then your Avarabba is your birchos HaTorah. Now, what happens if you didn't come up with this suffix until after davening. So now you're standing in shul, it's after davening, there's nobody there who didn't yet say birchos HaTorah, so you have nobody who could be moitzi you. You can't say Avarabba with kavanah to be birchos HaTorah because you already finished davening. You blew that opportunity. Says the Mishnah Berurah, well, l'chayra, in such a case you could still be mekel, because lamaisa you said Avarabba. So okay, so you said Avarabba, that will be your birchos HaTorah. Okay. Now we go weiter. Ois cotton bays. The Mechaber said that sarich li zaher me'oid. We have to be very, very careful with birchos HaTorah. Okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah, what does this mean to be careful with birchos HaTorah? Well, the first thing it means, says the Mishnah Berurah, is shaloi lilmoid ad sheyavarich. Make good and sure that you don't learn Torah before you make birchos HaTorah. Now it's funny, this sounds like a very simple thing. Make sure that you don't learn Torah until birchos HaTorah. There have been times that I found that this was a challenge. I'll give you an example. You got up in the morning and you're going to walk to shul for Shabbos davening. Let's say I daven Shabbos morning at 8 o'clock. So I got up a little bit later than usual, and all I had time to do was get dressed and get ready to go and walk out the door. Okay, so I'm walking to shul and I didn't say birchos HaTorah yet. Meantime, I had somebody with me, maybe my son, maybe a guest. They got up earlier. They already said birchos HaTorah. They already were learning. Now we're walking to shul. They want to tell me a geschmack of art on the parsha. I got a problem. I didn't say birchos HaTorah yet. So, there's a temptation. Okay, big deal. Maybe you're a little embarrassed. You don't want to show that you didn't say birchos HaTorah yet. What? It's 8 o'clock in the morning and you didn't say birchos HaTorah yet? So it's 8 o'clock in the morning and you haven't learned the word yet? So, okay, you want to be mekel. It's only hirhur. It's shmiya. I'm listening. Yeah, but what happens if you slip up and you get into a whole conversation? And now you're talking Torah also. So says the Mechaber, you have to be sarich li zar ba ma'oid. And says the Mishnah Berurah over here, nice cut and base, that means to be zahir, to be careful, shaloi lilmoid ad sheyavarech, that you should not learn Torah before you make birchos HaTorah. Continues the Chavetz Chaim, also, v'yavarech oisa b'simcha gedola. You should make the bracha of birchos HaTorah b'simcha gedola, with great happiness. Rabbi Sai, I say over so many times, this bracha, especially the bracha of HaShabach Banu, realize what you're saying when you make the bracha of HaShabach Banu. We're going to see, I believe, soon, but the Torah says it. The Torah says that the bracha of HaShabach Banu is a birchas hoidah. We're thanking the Rebbeinu Shalom for Maimon Har Sinai. We're thanking the Rebbeinu Shalom for giving us the Torah by Har Sinai. Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim, who chose us from all the nations. Like I've said before, Aleinu l'shabach l'Adon HaKol shelo yasanu ki goyei ha'aratzos. We are not like the Eino Yehudim. We're not the same. And look at the life that they lead. And look at the life that you're zeicha to lead. Look how full your life is, and how rich your life is, and how meaningful and purposeful your life is. You know why? Because you have a Torah. Why do you have a Torah? Because the Rebbeinu Shalom selected us from all the nations and gave us a Torah. So we have to make that bracha b'simcha gedola, ashreinu matoiv chelkeinu. So that's what the Mishnah Berurah says over here. First of all, be very careful, shaloi lilmoid ad sheyavarich. Second of all, v'yavarich ha'isa b'simcha gedola. Make the brachas of birchos HaTorah with simcha gedola. Dematzinu she'amru Chazal. We find that Chazal say, Nidarim Pei Aleph Amud Aleph, Alma of the Haaretz. The Klal Yisrael had a tremendous kasha by the Churban. Alma of the Haaretz. Well, why was the world? Why was Eretz Yisrael destroyed? Why was the Beis Hamikdash destroyed? They asked the Nevi'im. They asked the Talmidei Chachamim. They asked everybody, Alma of the Haaretz. Why? What was the big kasha? The big kasha was because at that time there were Yidden learning Torah. And usually Torah is Megan. Usually Torah protects us from piranhas, from punishment. And at the time of the Churban, apparently you had lots and lots and lots of Yidden sitting and learning Torah. So the Klal Yisrael had a very big, powerful kasha. Alma of the Haaretz. Why was the land destroyed? Why didn't the Torah protect us? And the pasuk says in Yirmiyah, "Vayomer Hashem," only the Rebbeinu Shalom was able to answer the question. Nobody else was able to answer the question. Not the Nevi'im, not the Talmidei Chachamim. Vayomer Hashem, and the Rebbeinu Shalom said, you know why? Al ozvam Torasi, because they forsook my Torah. V'amru Chazal, the Chazal said, Shedavar ze nishal Nevi'im. This question was asked to the Nevi'im. Al Mohav the Haaretz. Why was the land destroyed? She Yisrael hayu oiskim b'Torah. Klal Yisrael was being oisik b'Torah. Umatzinu, and we find shekal zman sheyu oiskim b'Torah. Generally speaking, whenever Klal Yisrael is being oisik b'Torah, v'ter HaKadosh Baruch Hu al aveinosayim. The Rebbeinu Shalom looks past their averis and doesn't punish them. V'lachein lo yadu al ma'avda. And that's why they couldn't fathom al ma'avda haaretz. HaKadosh Baruch Hu abaychein levavos yada. But the Rebbeinu Shalom, who searches out the heart of man, who understands our intentions, and who understands our thought processes, yada, he knew, the Rebbeinu Shalom knew, ki af al pi sheyu oiskim b'Torah, that even though the Yidden were learning Torah, lo hayu oiskin l'shem limud HaTorah. They were not learning Torah l'shma. They weren't learning Torah in order to be become the mitzvah of limud Torah. They weren't learning Torah because learning Torah is the ratzon haborei. It's the will of God that we should learn Torah. That's not why they were learning Torah. Ella k'may shalayim shach chachmas. They were learning Torah because it's a nice intellectual pursuit. And they enjoyed it, intellectual pursuit. So one guy did Sudoku puzzles, and one guy did word jumbles, and one guy played Scrabble, and one guy played chess, and one guy read engineering books, and another guy learned Torah. But that's not learning Torah l'shma. That's not learning Torah invested with Kedusha. That's learning Torah chas v'chalila like you're learning math. That does not grant you any divine protection. So again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu abaychein levavos yada, ki af al pi sheyu oiskim b'Torah, lo hayu oiskim l'shem limud HaTorah, ela k'may shalayim shach chachmas. V'lachein, and therefore, lo baruchu birchos HaTorah. Because that was their outlook on Torah, they didn't bother saying a bracha before it. Shelo yoseh HaTorah chashuva beinayim. Do you make a bracha before you do a Sudoku puzzle? No. So they didn't make a bracha before they learned Torah. It wasn't chashuv to them. It didn't have kedusha to them that they should make a bracha on it. V'lachein lo higena. And that's why it didn't protect Klal Yisrael. V'lachein, and therefore says the Chavetz Chaim, tzarich lizayer ma'od. We have to be very careful. V'litein hoida al shel bachabanu v'nasal lanu kleichem dasai. We have to be very careful, and we have to recite these brachas, and we have to thank the Rebbeinu Shalom for choosing us from amongst all of the nations and giving us the Torah, which is his klei chemdasai, his most desirable keli. Gam amru Chazal, the Chazal also say, she'ena zoiche chas v'shalom li yois loy ben tamil chacham, avur zeh she'ena nizar b'birchos HaTorah. If somebody is not nizar in birchos HaTorah, he won't be zoiche to have a child who is a Talmud Chacham. Now there's a Dirshu footnote over here, Dirshu footnote number 8, that discusses the birchos HaTorah. He says a very interesting thing. He says you have 3 brachas over here, right? We said, Lasik b'divrei Sarah, Harevna, and Asher Bachabanu. So he brings down over here in footnote number 8, a Chai Adam and a Pnei Yeshua, that say that Asher Bachabanu is a birchas Haidah, thanking the Rebbeinu Shalom for giving us the Torah. Lasik b'divrei Sarah and Harevna are birchas HaMitzvahs. The Lavush says a fascinating thing. The Lavush says that learning Torah is gavaldik hana. There's a tremendous amount of enjoyment in learning Torah. And therefore says the Levush that the birchos HaTorah are also a birchos hanenin. It's like a bird creates, a bracha that you make before you derive pleasure from this world, right? Also, bracha. We learned previously, you're not allowed to derive pleasure or benefit from olam hazeh without first making a bracha. Before you make a bracha, it's like hegdish. So you're not allowed to be nene from it. After you make the bracha, you're allowed to be nene. So says the Levush, Torah is a hana. It's one of the hanois of olam hazeh. You derive pleasure from learning Torah. So you got to make a bracha. And he says there's a bracha rishona and a bracha achrona. He says that the bracha of Asher Bakar Banu, he says is the bracha rishona, and Lasaik is the bracha achrona. Very interesting. And then the Brisker Rav says that birchos HaTorah is a special din. It's not birchos hanenin, it's not birchos hamitzvahs, it's a special din daraisa that Torah requires a bracha. Interesting. Okay. Let's do Sif Beis over here. It says the Mechaber, Tzarich levarech bein lemikra, bein lemishta, bein legemara, haga, bein lemidrash. You have to say birchos HaTorah bein lemikra, whether you're simply just reading psukim in Torah Shabbat, psukim from Chumash, or psukim from Tehillim, or psukim from anywhere else in Tanakh. Bein lemishnah, you're learning Mishnah Yomi, a simple Mishnayos, you need birchos HaTorah. Bein legemara, if you're going to learn Gemara, you need birchos HaTorah. And the Ramah says bein lemedrash, also for midrashim. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in Gimel, bein lemedrash. V'hamechaber gam kein moida bazeh. The Ramah is not coming to argue on the Mechaber, like somehow as if the Mechaber says that for Medrash you don't need birchos HaTorah, and the Ramah says you do. No, he says the Mechaber gam kein moida bazeh, that you need birchos HaTorah for midrashim. But he felt that you didn't have to say it because he felt that that would be included. Once you see that you have to make a bracha when you say psukim, you would understand that you have to make a bracha when you learn midrashim. Okay, I don't think I want to start Sif Gimel now with such little time left. So we're going to stop over here. We'll continue next time with Sif Gimel. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The source of limud HaTorah should be Megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rosh should send Yeshua's for us, Parnassus should do him to all those in need. And we should be zeichet to see the B'Yas Gal Tzedek, B'Meherav Yameinu, Amen. Be well.